Scene one, Apple, take one.
Hi, everyone. I'm Shane Borza. Welcome to another episode of Film Notes, the show where I sit down with people in the industry and talk to them about their role in the industry, what they do, and learn some of their notes on how they get started and how they've been able to make their projects. I'm excited to welcome, I think it's only my third pair on an interview ever, which is the team of Jason and Blue. And they are a married couple who do both commercial work and film work, and they do that both separately and together. So I'm excited to hear all about those different things. But we're also going to talk about your film Dawn Dusk, which is out now, and that's a feature documentary. And I really loved it, first of all, but it goes through a lot of different things. It's like grief and life and like the artist's journey and recovery and a whole bunch of things. But we're going to get into that too. But without further ado, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
So you're a pair of filmmakers, both individually and together. So who would like to start with, how did you both get into this? Was this something that you did separately, like either before you met or what have you? Or was it more of like, oh, we should maybe do something in the film world?
Yeah.
Yeah, we did start off separately. So we actually met in school, and both of us were studying to be filmmakers in school. And then we both, started our careers. We were both pursuing directing, but we had kind of our like second loves, I guess you could say, where I was working in art department and Jason was working in camera department. And as we were growing our careers, we started dating, and then we got married, and we were continuing to kind of work in those separate spaces, but we both still had, our goals of becoming directors. And we, we're trying to find our path like into that. And commercials just was like a really easy in. Especially we were in Chicago at the time, and Chicago's like a big ad town, and that was a lot of the work that we had been getting as a production designer and as a DP. So we kind of started making some branded content and small commercials for like small businesses on the side, and we started doing that together because we were like, well, we don't really want to like compete with each other and kind of better together in that way. And then it just kind of grew from there. And eventually we launched our like website and kind of branded ourselves as a duo and started directing commercials as a duo together. And then kind of in the midst of all of that, we were, thinking about our more creative pursuits, less on, just a money-making side and more of just our creative pursuits. And we were wanting to kind of make a piece for our portfolio. At the time, like little maker docs were pretty popular. And we were thinking, oh, let's make like a short maker doc about some sort of artist or crafts person. And it'll be like 5 minutes. And we, through some mutual friends, and somehow got invited to this open studio that Shelly Look was having. And that night we met her, and when we walked into the space, her studio, we were just very struck by the beauty of her work, the beauty of her studio, her kind of magnetic presence that she had. She was just a very compelling person.
Shelly is the subject of our documentary.
Well, yeah, and I'm getting to that. I'm getting to that. And so we asked her to grab coffee and kind of pitch this idea of doing this short video about her. And over coffee, we asked her, how did you get started doing leather bag making? And she she ended up telling us the story of her sister and how her sister was murdered by her sister's husband in a domestic violence incident. And now part of the proceeds from every bag that she makes and from her business goes to a domestic violence shelter. And she was also serving there at the time as well. And so we were just really struck by that. And kind of long story short, we started filming with her, and the story just kind of kept expanding and expanding, because of this deeper, kind of more personal story that was a part of, her work. And then,
like 9 years later,
we have a
documentary.
feature documentary. So that's kind of how we got started. And, Dawn Dusk is what the film is called. And it really is our first, it's our first feature.
Mm-hmm.
We've made a lot of other things along the way, other than commercials. We've made a bunch of short films and music videos and web series along the way. But Dawn Dusk was kind of our first big creative project, our big film that we undertook together, and it's our first feature.
Like I mentioned earlier, it's such a great film. It's kind of amazing to think it's your first feature because it's really masterfully done. And like you said, there's a lot of story in there. And for people that don't know, you go into a documentary with I want to tell this story about this person. And then a lot of times you realize there's 100 stories here. And then you kind of get buried in side quests and things, and it evolves. And especially if you're shooting for a long period of time, which usually, it's not like a feature where you're okay, we got our 30 days and then we're done. It's we shot for 30 days and we'll see them again in 6 months or 2 years from now, or whenever we get a chance to go again. And quite often when you're looking through stuff, you're sometimes reimagining what the story is, or things happen in life.
Mm-hmm.
But it's always inspiring to me too, because the longer a project is, the harder it is to write and keep going and all that. But as a pairing with especially the first feature, it's such a difference between, if you do a short film that shoots for 2 weeks, 9 years. So how did you move, especially as a co-directing couple, from the shorter projects to this 9-year project?
I think that as when we direct as a duo, we have a similar tone and aesthetic sense, and similar values, I think, in the stories that we care about. So that's a really good foundation. But then we also bring different skill sets to the table. I have this camera background, you have this art department background. We both love working with talent. So when we're working in a narrative space, we have different approaches to working with talent, and often when one of us is not eliciting the right performance, the other can. We can kind of rely on each other. In commercial especially, it's really helpful to be two people, because you have not only the work, you have the work of people management on the agency and client side. And the agency and client management's people management side is a project all in of itself, because when you come in as a commercial director, we might prep the job for a month and shoot for 2 days, and then maybe see it through the first edit. But the agency and the client might have been working on this project for a year before they got it approved and were ready to shoot. So to steal terminology from another commercial film director, Jordan Brady, he kind of talks about that directors are the midwives of the project. We're just there to deliver someone else's baby. And so it's really helpful sometimes, because I'm potentially going to be the one to connect with the client more, or you're the person who's going to connect with the client more. And there's been projects where I've spent almost all my time just hanging out with the client and the agency and making sure that they feel good, while Blue's really doing all the work. And so it's really helpful in that regard. Dawn Dusk is sort of a whole different ballgame in the sense that, because there was no deadline, and because we went in not even really knowing we were making a feature, we went in just kind of let's see what we get, and we can make a little let's try to get a Vimeo staff pick, for our 3-minute mini doc. It was 2016, 2017 when that was real popular. And so we just kind of would show up and just shoot a little bit. Like we had a time lapse day where I just like set up a moving time lapse on a camera, and we just did, different motorized moving time lapses of her working. We just said, hey, do you have bags to make? She's like, yeah, I got bags to make. I was like, can we just come in and film? We had B-roll days, and then we had separate days. We had interview days. Our interview days were, heavy days for all of us. We would talk to Shelley sometimes for 2 or 3 hours, which are very long interviews. We just had question after question, and the first interview day led to 10 more pages of questions that we wrote that we covered over the course of other interview days. And we spread those out to kind of let the story breathe. You can see that in her hair. Her haircut changes all the time because we just were filming all for a long time, and it just kind of let everything happen naturally. And so working as a duo in that was really interesting because we didn't have the pressure of a client. We didn't have the pressure of a deadline. So we both got to bring sort of our ideas to the table. And we both got to bring sort of our questions to the table. And we both got to sort of come and experience and just be in the same space together. And
like try out
and
things.
try stuff out. And so it was kind of an interesting space where this film, not only was it making of the film, it also helped, I think, develop our some of our creative sensibilities and some of our taste and some of our voice. I think that it was just like the two of us just like bouncing ideas off of each other. There was less pressure to get everything right and prepped, because when we're doing a commercial or a short film, you got to have everything prepped beforehand, because being two people, you don't want to confuse your crew and like hash things out on set. You want to be able to kind of come in and rely on like having most of your answers in place. Filmmaking is a lot of problem solving too, so you got to do that on set. But I think that Dawn Dusk was a little bit unique in that regard, in that it was actually a really freeing space for us to sort of play and see what was going on and film and yeah, I think that also probably did impact a lot of our working relationship and like teach us how to work together even better.
Yeah, it definitely did. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you talked a little bit about the commercial side at the beginning there, because that's something a lot of people don't really know, and it can be very different. Like you said, you're kind of just in there to do the job, and quite often it's very short, and then you're just kind of out, and you're like, all right, I guess they're going to do whatever they want, because it's like you said, it's not really your baby. You're like, here you go, take it home. I'll probably never see it again. So that's a great analogy. I like that. I wanted to go back. You mentioned Chicago. I don't remember. Is that where you at, or that's where you went to film school?
That's where we both went to film school, and then we lived there for about 13 years total. And then we moved to LA.
What, 4 or 5 years ago?
4 years ago. Yeah.
2021.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you moved from Chicago to LA, did you find any changes in your work? Like, hey, we're coming in as like successful commercial directors and people that have done a bunch of shorts, and you continue to do that. It's always hard when you're in a new place because people don't know you, but even though it's a big world, it's small industries sometimes, and sometimes people can go, oh, I know these great people that just moved here, and then you hit the ground running. But you also mentioned you have a bunch of kind of other skill sets and things you've done before, and sometimes we have to go, well, I can't get any work doing this, so then I'm going to do this, and then when I can, I go back to that. So how was that getting in? Because that was kind of also pandemic times.
Yeah. I think it was a very unique time, so it's hard to judge it as like a normal
non-pandemic
like situation. We moved in the pandemic, and then basically 2 years later, or like really like a year and a half later, was kind of when a lot of things started changing in the industry.
Yeah.
So it feels like we haven't really had like a normal experience of kind of transitioning in the industry. But when we moved here, we did actually, it was like a pretty profitable first like year for us. When we were here, we booked like a few commercials with like bigger name brands that we had been trying to go for, and that was really exciting. So it felt very encouraging that I think we did kind of feel like when we were in Chicago, it kind of felt like we had plateaued a little bit in our careers. And that was one of the reasons why we wanted to move out to LA, because we had and have, aspirations of doing more entertainment, more creative focused work. And so it made sense to come out here for that. But it was also interesting because when we moved to LA, when we were living in Chicago, when we would get booked on jobs, oftentimes, not always, but often, many times, we had interesting moments when we would meet creative teams where there was kind of a questioning of, so why are you in Chicago kind of thing. And
it was almost an obstacle.
Yeah. And we, there had been a couple times where producers had told us, like, sorry, you didn't get the job. They went with the LA director because that's what's safe. And we're like, interesting. And then when we moved here, those questions stopped. And
we never had a moment of being questioned again.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in LA? Great. Let's get to talking about the project.
Yeah. So that was a really interesting thing to happen. Yeah. Which, that's, I think that's kind of going away more now. I think now the industry is in a bit of a flux, but it's also like, especially post-pandemic, I think everyone's just kind of like living wherever they want to, and then you just kind of go where the work is.
And especially at the sort of the like creative leadership positions, DP, director, production designer, writer, well, less writer, I guess, but those positions are at a higher level are less like location dependent. Brands and agencies generally like to hire the best person for the job, and that doesn't, so like travel is not always a problem. So we were actually working quite a bit in LA and all around the country while we were living in Chicago. Whereas like if you're a technician, you're a little bit more like local dependent. If you're a focus puller, like there are like really like top end focus pullers that travel with their DPs all over the country and the world. But then there are, your local, Chicago and your local LA focus pullers who like do work mostly in town, or, they do a couple jobs out of town here and there, but they're less likely to be traveled because they're like the sought after, like creative talent, not to diminish that position. It's just sort of a slight different in approach, because that's more of a technical position that gets hired much later in the process of putting like a commercial together.
Well, I always love asking people about how the start happened, because as you probably know, you ask 100 people in the industry how they got in or how they got started, you get 100 different answers. And one of the reasons why I started this show is to like help people kind of understand like how things work, or like what it is that people do. Like, I think still there's a lot of like, oh, you work in film? Are you an actor or director? And that's kind of like the only things that people really know. Or so I was glad even you mentioned like focus pulling. Like some people might like, what does that mean? What does that person do? So I love hearing that. But you're right on both counts. I think there still is that kind of perception that people have. It's almost like stereotypes of like, oh, you're not here, why? Or you are here, you're fine. But also that it is opening up. I've talked to people like in Texas and Virginia and all over the place. And I had a producer tell me last season, I thought this was a great way. He said it used to be there were only two hubs. There was New York and LA. And he goes, so there's still hubs. There's just more hubs.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, that's a great way to think about it, because you don't have two now, you have like 5 to 10, depending, and some are smaller. Like I live in Vegas, there's shows all over the place and studios getting opened up here, and there's a really strong like Nevada Film Commission, and we just had the well, it's actually moving back to it was in Santa Monica, what do they call it, the big annual like sales.
Yeah.
I went last year and I couldn't remember, but they moved it here to Vegas for 1 year, and I guess they pulled it back. But we as a local community here, we're like, aha, everyone's going to come to Vegas now. This is going to be the new LA. And then, well, so much for that. But like you said, lots of flux and flex going on. Oh, there she is. I was told there might be a video cat.
Okay.
Fun fact, because I saw the cat. So we went to Texas a year or two ago and shot a film with
Yeah.
some friends, and they have some cats that we filmed like on their property, and we used the cats in the film. And we actually had one of their friends as the cat wrangler, because occasionally you like pan over and the cat's like right there, and like, God damn it. So it was pretty fun. So want to talk a little bit more about Dawn Dusk. You know, you mentioned it's like 9 years. So how were you going through that? Was it like, hey, I'm going to work on the film and oh, I have a gig? Or like, did you only like go through and edit and shoot and plan and you had money saved up? Like, how were you able to kind of balance life and other things like while you're doing this? Because you talked about at the beginning, like not realizing it was a feature. So it sounded like it was kind of organic process to end up to where you are now.
Yeah. We didn't have to spend a lot of money at first on the movie because it was, I had a camera, I had lenses, we had sound equipment, and we had some basic, like pretty decent lights. And Shelley's studio was 20 minutes from where we lived. So on off days,
the hardest part was finding parking.
Yeah, honestly. So on off days, Shelley was really gracious. She would just tell us, we asked her just to keep us updated with what she was doing. So she'd be like, hey, I have a client meeting. She's open to being filmed. I have a design meeting with my interns. Would you like to come film that? Or there's a trade show I'm going to be shooting at coming up. Or even like sometimes we were like, hey, we'd love to like connect with you and your family. And she's like, well, I'm going to be going to see them. Let me talk to them and see if they'd be open to you guys coming for a period of time. She was very accommodating in just like letting us know what was going on. So it was organic. It's a good word. We would just grab the kit, load up the cart, and show up into her studio and film. And depending on what we were doing, we talked a little bit about earlier, sometimes it was more just visual, sometimes it was, spending time talking to her. But we could just do that over the course of the three and a half, almost 4 years of actual like filming with her.
Yeah.
And
I think it's worth mentioning that, I think we were, it was a little different than, this is something we'll probably talk about a little later on, but it was a different approach to creating this documentary than I think you normally do, where you are like, I want to make this documentary and I'm going to make a plan to make this documentary. It was not like that. It was like, this fell into our lap. We were responding to the story, and we kind of had to become more proactive as we were filming. So as the story kind of unfolded, we then began to try to like get ahead of it and think about, okay, like we think that this is the story, the story arc that we're creating here, and we have a lot of this part of it, we have a lot of her like in her creative process, and we have a lot of her like in her business entrepreneurship. We need to now like show her family. We need to like talk about this subject more, like to kind of balance it out. And so
we didn't really outline, but we tried to start to visualize in our heads what an edit might look like, and then try to get that stuff.
And then that's where, the asking her like, hey, do you have this coming up? Came into play, of just kind of being in communication with her of, hey, we'd love to get like this kind of footage, or this kind of, if this is happening in your life, we'd love to be there to film it. And then she was also really good about, keeping us up to date about things, specifically like events. I think the biggest one was the Wings Gala, where they were honoring her sister at the Wings Gala, which Wings is the domestic violence shelter that she was serving at. And we weren't actually allowed to go film there because
we could film at the gala, but we couldn't film at the shelter.
We weren't allowed to film at the shelter because, these are women, mostly women, who are fleeing from abusers. And so it's private,
their situation is unsafe. So
they're unsafe.
We can't like put any visuals that might clue someone in
exactly
to where they might be or might have been.
So we weren't able to go film there, very understandably, but that was a big part of her story and her life and this work that she was doing there. So we were like, how do we show that? How do we show that part of her life? And it just so happened that they were honoring the memory of her sister at their annual fundraising gala. And so we were like, perfect. And so, and she gave us a heads up about that. And
things like that took a little work to sort of arrange to like have permission to be there. That kind of day was a little bit more costly. We hired, a sound mixer and a couple other camera operators so that we have a really good coverage. But for the most part, a lot of it was just us, and a lot of it was like on our days off or like our in between. Sometimes we'd have like a pre-pro meeting in the morning, and then we'd go and like film for a few hours with Shelly. We weren't pulling 10-hour days with filming with her. Like, we were just popping in to get what we needed when it was available to us. So that was an interesting space. It was very low cost, and like it fit with our it fit with our, I guess, the way our life had been situated at that time. So it was, we were able to sort of get out and go film over time. And so we also weren't doing it full time. We also weren't filming like 4 or 5 days a week. We were sometimes not filming for a few weeks.
Because we had, by the end of it, we had over 80 hours of footage, and that was a lot to go through. So I think any more than that would have been extreme overkill it would have been boring of just like filming her at work every day, basically.
And things that we don't have, like footage wise, we don't have because it just doesn't exist. There are things, there are even elements in the movie if something feels a little jarring or a little like abrupt in the story, it's because it was that way for us too.
And for Shelly.
Yeah, and for Shelly too. We'd be like, oh, you're taking a sabbatical to Florence. Okay, cool. And there was like no build up to that. It was just sort of like, you're doing that. You're leaving in a month. Okay, all right, great. How do we incorporate this? And do we want to incorporate this in the story? Kind of like a lot of those questions would come up.
And then I think it's also worth mentioning that along the way we kind of, as we were reacting to these things and as we were building the story, kind of following along with it, we also were we were like, oh, we should probably apply for some grants. We should probably try to find funding, because at some point we're not going to be able to do this on our own dime any longer. We're going to go into post-production. We're going to need to bring on more people to finish this film. And that was a little hard. There was, for a while there, we were trying to do the whole grant writing thing.
It's really hard.
And apply for different funds. It's a lot of work. That is like a full-time job. It is a massive amount of work applying for grants and funds, especially in the documentary space.
We got one
local City of Chicago grant.
And we did get fiscal sponsorship, which allowed people to contribute to our film and make it tax deductible. But we didn't get any other major grants. It's really hard to pitch a half-finished, you're not exactly sure what the story is going to be documentary.
A lot of funds that are out there are more for the pre-production phase or for the post-production phase. And we did apply for some post-production grants later on, but we ultimately ended up doing a small crowdfunding campaign to fund the finishing of the film.
Sorry to stop the show, but we've got some bills to pay around here, and to do that, I wanted to point out a couple things I've got on offer at ShaneBorza.com. As both a master-level mental health coach and an award-winning filmmaker, I have the experience and expertise to help you go further faster, regardless of whether that is in your production or life. I am psyched to announce all my courses and books have been updated and expanded and are available on both Apple Books and at my shop. Especially wanted to point out my Film Notes book and workbook, where you can learn everything you need to make your film and get it out to the world. If you need help with either your life or film, please reach out. And now, back to the show. Well, it's great to know more about that whole process. And again, I think it's helpful for people to learn, it is as different as commercial and kind of normal filmmaking is. It's the same with like narrative and documentary, because it is so non-traditional. And quite often you are just doing it yourself, or you have the camera guy and the sound person, and that's it. But a couple things you mentioned. So for the grant writing, it can be great if you get one, but you kind of you need to like hire someone who does that, because they also know the ins and outs of that world, and it is very much its own world. But I always encourage people, if you can't do it on your own, see, how can you do it? See what's available. And especially for these long projects, like you mentioned, it evolved and changed as you went. And you're like, oh, well, maybe this is a feature, not a short.
Yeah.
In some ways, there's like, oh, there's more we can do with it. But then there's also like, well, there's more you have to do.
Right.
Exactly.
As well as, like you mentioned, the kind of like hard pivots. But that's kind of like what life is. And I think especially in a documentary, it can be very paralleling, where people are like, oh, they just dropped this whole new, like, she's going to do this now. Okay. Oh, well, like that's, it's not as outrageous, I think. But if you watch like a narrative film, sometimes you're like, what is happening with this script?
Right. Yeah. I think you're trained to just read stories in a certain way. And docs don't always fit into that.
This is earlier than I normally ask this, which is like at the end, but I think it's kind of a great way, because you're talking more about the like nuts and bolts of making this project. But like, what might be some of your notes that like, oh, now that we've done this feature documentary, like, let's say you're going to do another one, or if someone else was going to try to make a project like this, like hard won lessons, things maybe you wished you'd known ahead of time, or anything else that stands out as like some good notes to share.
Yeah, I mean, I think we definitely we followed our our hearts in this documentary. Like we followed what was kind of tugging on our hearts, and kind of what seemed to be like being presented before us as like something that we were in a way being asked to like respond, like steward and respond to well. And I think that for the way that we made this was very much like, this is something that came to us that we then responded to. And I think for us uniquely as filmmakers, that is probably how we would probably make a documentary in the future. Because we're not we've never been big doc people, funny enough.
Ironically,
like right now we actually have made more documentary documentarian friends, and it's really interesting just seeing the difference between us and them. They and learning from them too, of like how you should go make a doc. And I think if you're someone who loves documentaries, and that is like a passion of yours, and you want to go make one, I think it really begins with, what's the story that you want to tell, or what's like a subject matter that you are interested in, that you could like find a story in. And then it's kind of then doing your research and finding what's happening in the world that that isn't being shown or being told, or what's a story out there that feels unique and you think is like worth telling, and worth investing a lot of your time, a lot of your energy, a lot of your creative space, and your finances. So I think it begins with that. And then from there, it's, I think ideally it's creating a plan and creating a funding plan, maybe bringing on a partner to help you, like especially like a production company partner. There are a lot of things like that out there, and that was the reason why we didn't get a lot of the grants that were out there. Is like a lot of the grants are kind of designed to be more partnerships, where like the organization would actually have some sort of creative input into the project as well. And so there's a lot of things like that out there, which are very helpful, and it's like great to have an organization come alongside you in that way to partner with you. And so I think it begins first with the thinking about what kind of story do you feel like you would be able to run with for the long run? What is something that you are passionate about and that you can continue to be passionate about? Because when you sign on to a doc, unless you're signing on just as like a funder or
someone's got money and is
player.
hiring you to just go make the thing. And
Like,
if the money's already there, it's a little bit easier.
Yeah.
But if the money's not there.
But for the most part, you're signing on for the long run. You're signing on for a multi-year project.
Yeah.
And so
people ask us if we make another doc, and we're always like, I don't know. Probably not.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe, but at the moment, like, we're not pursuing making another doc. This is, maybe we're one and done doc filmmakers, which is fine.
I mean, like I said, I think the reason why we made Dawn Dusk was because it was something that
it was for us as much as it was
presented to us, and it was something that we felt like we needed to respond to. It was a story that we felt like needed to be told.
I think that some very practical things like that, we're still kind of learning and engaging in, as the difficulty of distribution at the level and scale that our film is at. It's really hard. A lot of it's kind of counterintuitive. Our film is out, you can watch it, but I'm not getting like real-time metrics about like how it's doing. So it's very hard to market the movie. It's hard to know how people are responding. It's hard to know like what marketing is translating into views. It's also very non-traditional in the sense that, like, you think of like, you have a big box office weekend for your opening weekend, like, and then you have to do really well there. A digital release like ours is like, the expectation is that it's going to actually grow over time, because it, it sort of gets quietly released, and unless you have like a lot of money to sort of plaster opening date, it's much more about like building up attention to the movie over time, and we're kind of in this for the long run in terms of like recouping and getting views. And that's been a really interesting process, and it's also all changing sort of so rapidly that I feel like we're kind of like caught in the middle of I think it had our movie, the streamers are not buying docs like they were. They've like become a lot more corporate, and there's sort of like three categories. There's sort of music, celebrity, sports, four categories: sports and true crime, none of which our movie really fits into. And so I think in maybe 2018, 2019, there was this sort of heyday of like this peak golden documentary moment. And now it's very like corporatized. Yeah. If that's a word, I don't know. Yeah. But that is what we're experiencing and seeing a lot of, is that we're not fitting into the market, and the streamers are buying less movies like ours. So then we're left to sort of do not self-distribution. We have a great distribution partner at Buffalo 8, but it's a little bit more of it's a different route. It's a digital distribution revenue sharing deal where we got to just try to get views over time, and it's been a little bit backwards of thinking of the way we have traditionally released movies as like for so long. Yeah.
And I think that's a big difference about our film is, we didn't really set out to make this film to make money necessarily. We set out because we felt like it was a story that needed to be told. And right now, the documentaries that are kind of out in the world, like doing well and finding the most success are kind of the documentaries that are made to make money. They're like the big name documentaries. They're about celebrities, like whatever they might be, and they're treated like a business. Yeah. Whereas if you're making a documentary because you are passionate and you're passionate about the story, it's not necessarily going to fit into that model, into that mode of making a film like it's like you are starting a business and you're doing it for the revenue. So
another note is that we're still working on this movie. I know that it's done. I know that we worked on it for 9 years, but it's not done. We're here promoting. We're on the podcast with you because of our film. We're managing our social media. Unless you're getting like a really knockout distribution deal where they're going to pump like your distributor's going to pump a ton of money into marketing your film, you're like going to end up marketing the movie yourself a lot. Like your distributor is going to help get you like onto the platforms. They're going to do the pitching. They're going to do a lot of that work. But like a lot of the work to actually get the word out about the movie has been on us and is left on us, which frankly was unexpected and has been hard because it's a totally different. I know how to make commercials. I understand the marketing and advertising world, but like marketing your own movie is a whole job in and of itself. And so we've been, we spend a lot of time doing that every week. And so we're still working on it, and we still will continue to work on it for years to come. It'll slow down and it'll settle out, but it's not done. It's like a thing that we want people to keep watching, and it's you can watch it anytime over the next however many years the internet exists. So
it is kind of like this middle level of, we have a lot of friends who have also made docs who have self-distributed, and that's, a whole other thing where it's even more work on you because you're basically self-distributing. You're, trying to find places to screen it and things like that. And, we didn't do that. We have a distributor. So we're kind of like in this middle range where we're not like, we're not showing in theaters like some of the bigger docs that are out there right now. But we also are on our streaming and things like that. Yeah.
Well, I can echo some of that. It is a big learning curve for the difference between post and distribution. And even in filmmaking, you can specialize. If you're, like you mentioned, if you're a focus puller, you don't deal with pre or post. You're just there for production pretty much, and that's your lane. But if you're making a film, you're going through all three, but then you have to learn like, oh, our film's done. Well, what do we do with it and how do we get it out? Like there's this whole, so our distributor taught us the term, which I was like, what's that? So they call it post. So you're out of post and you have to do all this, like you said, continuous marketing and campaigns and emails and social media, and you have to find the links and you have to remember to rotate through, and you have to, it's like advertising, they need to hear it 50 times before they remember. And then, it's on a new, it's been 3 quarters, it's on a new thing. You're like, okay, we have to add this into, the rotation, or it's trial and error and all that. So there is a lot of work there, but I'm really glad because, as you know, the amount of films that get started and the amount of films that get done are like hugely out of balance. So just the fact that you completed the film, it's a feature, it's distributed. I was talking to a friend, he's been an editor for like 20 years. And he said, wow, you have features on, we have 2 features distributed. He's like, wow, you have 2 features that are distributed. He's like, I don't have any friends that have done that.
Yeah.
So every time those things happen, you're like, oh, we took a step up the ladder.
Yeah.
So just in case you haven't felt that, congratulations on being distributed feature filmmakers.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I did want to give you a little spotlight here. You mentioned that it's out. So where can people see the film? How can they learn more about the film? Where can they see the trailer? All that stuff.
You can always go to dawnduskfilm.com, which has the trailer, has links to where you can watch. If you go to dawnduskfilm.com/where to watch, that has all the links where to watch it. But you can also, just to be more specific, you can find it on Tubi for free with ads. You can find it on Amazon, available for rent. You can find it on YouTube for free with ads, and a number of other streaming channels. I'm calling out those because those are the ones that we're primarily focusing on and offer the best, revenue share for filmmakers. So the best way to support is to support on those channels. But you can watch on any of the channels that you might have that we're streaming on. Yeah, you can get in. You can follow us at dawnduskfilm.com on our socials, and Jason and
at dawnduskfilm.
At dawnduskfilm, and then we're at Jason and Blue. So if you want to connect with us too, you can see some of our commercial work or some of the other things that we're working on.
And I'm just going to ask a favor of the audience. So I actually got the screener, I forget when Emily and I first got in touch a couple of months ago this summer, and I don't think the film was out yet. And so now it is. So I played it on both Tubi and YouTube.
Nice, thank you.
Because every play counts. So anyone who's listening, if you have a film out, if you know people that made a film, or if you want to watch this film, watch it on as many platforms as possible. Like it, leave a review, share it, hit the thumbs up, whatever it is. All those things really help the algorithms in the background to promote the film and have it be seen by other people, especially that kind of organic, or we call it like the stumble upon.
Yeah.
Because they'd be like, oh, you like this film, you might also like this film. Well, it's like Google. You don't want to be on page 10, no one will look. You need to be on page 1. So I encourage people to go to the site. And one of the things I like to do in the edit, so when you talk about the website, like I'll have it up and there'll be the link and then they can see the page and all this stuff. But I always encourage people to do that. And not everybody has every player, but you probably have a streaming platform that the film is on. So go watch it. And especially that word of mouth advertising, it doesn't cost people anything. So I always encourage people, what did we used to do back in the day? We'd be like, oh my God, you have to hear this. You have to watch this. In a way, it's easier but harder today to just cut through the noise because there's so much. But, it's very easy to just copy a link. So I always encourage people, like, if you watch this film and you like it, like copy and paste it into a text or an IG or whatever, and let people know about it because it's really helpful to the filmmakers to get their stuff out there. One last thing I wanted to ask you, and I know you said that you're probably one done in documentaries, but what's next for you, either together or separately? Do you have other projects? Are you just going to work on other people's stuff for a while? Like, what's next for you both?
Yeah, I think right now, after getting this film out there, we're kind of in a season of focusing on some of our more bread and butter work right now. We're still, directing commercials and branded content. That's how we make our living. So that we're kind of focused on that right now. But both of us, between the two of us, we also have each have a handful of scripts that we're writing and working on, all narrative. So I think our next projects will be narrative. I also have a short film that I directed and a short music video that I directed that is currently being submitted to festivals, and hopefully we'll get a nice festival run for either or both coming up in this next year. So you can keep a lookout for that. But we both have some stories that we want to tell, and we're trying to figure out
in this ever-changing
how to tell them.
time. How do we get those made?
Yeah, so that's kind of where we're sitting at right now in our lives and careers.
Well, it's great to hear, and again, it was a great film. It was great to learn, more about the process of it. I love the stories about the stories, and that's one of the reasons why I started this, is so I could I started off that first season, was just well, who do I know that I can talk to? Yeah. And so it's grown now to people like yourself. I'm like, oh, now I have new friends that I didn't know before, and I got to see this new movie that I may not have known about before. Amazing. Yeah. Anything else you want to bring up, either about the film or any other projects or anything else before we start to wrap up here? Or any other recommendations of where people can connect or follow you or see your stuff?
I think that all the websites we gave are the most relevant. I'd love to see some reviews on Letterboxd or IMDb if you guys have time. That's helpful too. Yeah. And
we also we directed some fun commercials that we desperately need to update our site with. So I think we'll be in the next couple months, we'll be releasing some new work to share, and you can see that on our Jason Blue website or on our Instagram as well.
I think your audience is probably mostly filmmakers. So this is an industry of connections. So, we'd love to connect. Let's chat.
Yeah, I'm actually actively looking for collaborators who are interested in magical realism or sci-fi fantasy. Those are the genres that I'm interested in, and would love to find producers, writers who are looking to collaborate in those spaces.
Well, we should talk a little off mic after we wrap up. And that's another thing I always encourage people, whether you're going to film festivals or it's online, like you said, it is an industry of connections. And sometimes you're like, I need a thing, and someone's like, oh, I wish someone would hire me to do the thing, and you just have to put that chocolate and peanut butter together, and you're like, oh my God.
Oh, that actually sounds really good right now, by the way.
Yeah. When does it not? Well, just thank you again so much for being here. Like I said, it was great to see the film. It was great to get to know you both and talk about it. And I'll encourage everyone to check out all the links. And, to do the little wrap up, I always like to remind people, I mean, I listen to a lot of podcasts. I don't watch a lot of podcasts, but I put this out as a YouTube show to watch because we're talking about filmmaking, and you get to see, the trailers and the posters and the links and the screenshots if you watch the show. So please go to YouTube and watch it there. There's new episodes every month. And if not, we're on all the, platform things like Spotify and Apple and everything. So you can always listen to us there. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month. Thanks for watching. If you'd like to support the show, please click on the link below. You can also contact me at my website if you have any questions about filmmaking or anything else. Off to the side, you'll see a couple of my books, Film Notes and the Film Notes Workbook. I encourage you to check those out if you'd like to learn more about filmmaking. See you in the next episode.
Scene 1, Apple, take 1.